Hello, everyone. First off, I want to introduce the director of the film that you've just watched, Rémi Anfosso. Hi, Rémi.
Hi everyone. Hi New Zealand.
And Kyle Newmaster, who was the composer or head of music for the film.
You.
So thank you so much. It was a really interesting perspective to see. I was thinking it does feel a lot like time travel because, of course, you just couldn't take a team of 25 people to 3 restaurants in France now. Has that been a surreal experience finishing that film, Remy, when it was a different time that you were operating in?
It's a really good question. I think that we've worked internationally for this film. So part of post-production was made in France. Another part was made in the United States. So it was almost like everyone was working from home almost. So I think it could have been made easily during this pandemic too as well. But I don't think that we would have been able to make it this way today. It's kind of surreal to think back about the shooting for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, because there was David's team and there were our team also all like blended together in a small kitchen. That definitely couldn't happen in 2020.
So one of the scenes in the film, it's very obvious that all the chefs don't really have enough room to move. I was wondering what that was like from a production perspective, because it's very hard to shoot, but also you've got 2 teams working in close coordination. Was that a similar thing to what the chefs experienced?
I think our job was to be as invisible as can be. So that came with a lot of tricks like shooting through windows, for example, and this kind of stuff. But also using long lenses when you're in a kitchen to kind of try to obviously not be in the way, but also not be in their field of vision because when they see you, they unconsciously are already in a film. And we don't want that. We want like raw emotion. We want something pretty pure. But then all the chefs were so welcome to have us in their kitchen and kind of like move around. So I think it looked like a ballet almost, I would say. Yeah.
How did you find David Kinch? What was your road to telling this story?
David's very down to earth,
Hmm.
I would say. Not what I was expecting for a 3 Michelin star chef. I didn't know much about 3 stars before, like um, what I thought was elitist restaurants or elitist experiences.
Hmm.
And so that was the main idea of the film actually in editing was to not make an elitist film and just make a film about art and food. And I think that was very true to David. And my first impression with him was very easy to talk to, amazing guy, reads a lot, has a lot to say on the subject. Like it's extraordinary. But I think my job mostly was to listen a lot and try and transcript that emotion that I first had with him when I first met him into the screen.
Did that impression of him for you change over the course of the voyage? Did your impression of how his restaurant worked? And as you say, elitism, I mean, I've never been to a 3-star Michelin star restaurant, I've been to a Michelin starred restaurant. They do seem
Right.
like another world that isn't really part of ours. How did you find going into those worlds?
Well, to respond to your first question, has my perspective changed on David?
Yeah.
Um, it's certainly evolved. You watch dailies, which are like what we shot, right?
Mm.
And we had, I think, almost 100 hours of film for this documentary. And so you watch that very closely, and you tend to learn a lot of things on people when you watch them for 100 hours, right? For sure, things that maybe were not intended for them to were not intended to for you to see, but certainly interpretation comes in the way for sure. And then what was the other part of the
Sorry,
question
mate.
again?
My
I forgot.
portmanteau question. The second half was how did you find the elitist, well, what you thought of as elitist worlds going into them? What was your impression of them, and how did it change?
I think the main thing they're working on is make you feel at home. And that's a very, very big feeling that at least I had, and I think most of the team had, was how we were welcomed and how seamless and easy it was with them. So I thought I was going to dive in something very high end, and it was certainly high end, but high end in a bad way, like you will not fit in. But what they really want you to feel like is they want you to feel at ease, they want you to feel at home, and that's something that's applicable to everyone. So I think yeah, I think that's what I felt when I was there.
And how did you come to work with Kyle?
Kyle and I worked together on my previous project, and he was so unbelievable that it was like, you're gonna, if you'd like to, you're gonna be in my life for a long time. So yeah, what would you say, Kyle?
I think, yeah, we worked together on a short film. I think how long was it? About a 20-minute film back in 20. And it was actually no dialogue. So it was music top to bottom, and it was very artistic as well. And I really got to know Rémi's musical taste and his style of filmmaking. And one thing I learned was that he's just very creative, and he really likes experimentation, and he likes to let the composer try things, and then we sort of go from there. So I learned a lot on that one, and then we came to this project, and he had been with it for quite a long time and had a really good idea of what he was looking for. So don't know if I answered the question, but I guess we worked together on the previous project and then this one, and I think we've really developed a great way of working internationally, just kind of like we're doing right now. You know, we passed ideas back and forth, and yeah, I think we really speak a similar musical language now after these two projects. So it's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to doing more in the future. So
the film's score is very cinematic, and it does feel like a score for a very different film. And if you separated it, if it wasn't with the film, but presented together, they're perfect partners. How did you build that language? Because it's kind of, for me, it's movement and stillness, right? Like a kitchen, you have these huge moments of movement, like the train station sequence, and then you go to the kitchens and you're trying to give them space. How did you develop that language throughout the film?
Like I said, Rémi really had a very specific idea, especially for each chapter of the film. So the beginning was more about developing the characters and kind of creating the sound for David and the kitchen and everybody before they traveled. And then we wanted each area of France to have its own sound based on the relationships and the characters and who they're meeting. And so each area had to be its own distinct sound musically. So I think Rémi and I talked a lot about, for example, the first area they go in France, in Provence, if I'm saying that right, Rémi, it was very awkward at times for some of the people as they were discovering, you know, that they didn't speak French, and they were kind of trying to feel it out and see how they could be and work in another country and be respectful. And so the music had to have this kind of patient and at times a little unnerving sound. So there were different instrumentations that we used for that. Like you might remember, there was kind of a Bernard Herrmann type style track in one of the moments. And when they go to Paris, we wanted it to have more of a classical sound to it. So there's a few cues in there that sort of developed that. So that was a little more of a string quartet, traditional instrumentation. And, you know, so each area had its own sound instrumentally and sonically. But Rémi, I think we talked a lot about a few of the scenes, making sure that we didn't overwrite it. You didn't want it to sound like a Hollywood movie. It had to be more about the relationships, and the music had to be a character that was alongside of everything happening. So I think it was just a lot of trial and error and experimentation and discussion. We were for a good 2 months, like nonstop back and forth. And then when Rémi came here for the final week, we were pretty much here at the studio working, 15 hours a day, just perfecting every little idea. So.
Why is that, Rémi? Why is that motif-based, like really human kind of language of music important to you in documentary making?
Would you rephrase that?
Yeah, sorry. Why is the music important to tell that story? Why was it so important to you?
Oh, right. I think it's a whole part of experience. I think if you're able to give, it was such a human film. I mean, the film to me is based on relationships and bonding and families in kitchen, all these ideas. So to use everything that we could to kind of provide this experience for the audience was essential. I think that what we wanted to, I think it added a lot to what we tried to show in the film, which was essentially characters tuning in, being in tune all throughout the film. So Kyle, you talked about different instruments for different part of the film, and Robert, when you say that it feels like 1, 2, 3, 4 different films for the 4 acts, it is really true. The idea was from what I got, David is also brought his kitchen to kind of show them what he's learned in France, and we can feel in California that he's brought back all throughout his experience. He's brought back things he's seen as he's learned in the past 30 years in France, in all those areas. And so the idea also, I think, was to give a special flavor to Provence, Paris, and Marseille, and have all of those kind of mixed when we are in California, and eventually all those like tuning in together the more we grow into the movie. Yeah, I think that's very related to the idea of a road trip as well.
And also we had, as we developed the sound of each area, we found some common motives and themes that we wanted to sort of bring to help tie it all together to create that feeling of family. So we did have ideas that came back within each area, sometimes very subtle. That was important to show the characters as they progressed and learned and grew closer throughout the film.
One of the things I was thinking about, Kyle, was a kitchen, and this story is very much about a kind of tension between individuals and the ensemble, right? In a kitchen. Am I making this up, or were you doing that in the score as well? Because I felt like you were working, the soloists and the ensemble were in a conversation.
Yeah, I think so. We definitely tried to make sure that certain solo instruments were featured and were a personality that were accompanied. For example, certain parts of the film, we would have the violin actually trying a lot of experimental kind of bending sounds. As Rémi actually really likes the avant-garde, and he likes, like I mentioned, things to be experimental. So we tried a lot of sounds, and that was kind of the soloist along with something a little more traditional. And so yeah, we played a lot with that. The different areas had different instruments that were featured. The beginning was more celeste and piano and brighter sounds. The violin came in when they got to France. The third area, like I said, was more traditional, mostly. Fourth area was kind of a variety, and we brought in some more like synthesizer type elements and more modern, but spacious as well. And then so to answer your question, yeah, we definitely tried to make sure that the personality of the soloist was like its own character playing along with the ensemble, which could be very much like a cook amongst all the other cooks in the kitchen. So,
Rémi, just in terms of choosing this as a focus, is there something fascinating to you about our relationship with kitchens and food, or was it more the people that you were interested in?
It's a really good question. From the start, I knew that we didn't really want to, I mean, at least I didn't really want to make a film just about food that I will never probably try. So the idea, the question became, then what do I want to see, you know? And for me, it's like it's a feeling that I get when I first start watching the dailies and when I'm on the set. So I feel that something could definitely become the movie, and then that feeling is like a driving force that goes into the movie. And when I started watching all the dailies, I got a feeling of a Sisyphus character, but also relationships and family, and you know, they keep talking about generation and passing on. So it's teaching, and I see the equivalent of parents in that. But when I was watching the dailies, as I mentioned, what was shot, I was looking closely at David and watching the look on his face. And that's a feeling that got into me fairly quick. I don't know if it was intended or not, but it's kind of a parental, fatherly look. You know, everything he's pushed for is finally working on its own, and this seemed like a great feeling for him. And then the ability to let go of his kitchen team players, and in some extent, if it felt like a home, you know, just like what they're trying to do, like elite restaurants. It felt like a home, like a portable home of connections and relationships they built and traveled with. That's what started the idea of a family and the idea of making a film about relationships and humans in general, because that's something that was more fascinating to me as an audience, because that's something we can all relate to. Food is an emotional trigger to me in the film, and so it's almost like a painting, you know. And so this idea of family, actually in music, we've used it a lot. We calculated a theme for that shows up at very specific moments in the film, which is actually also the last cue of the film. It was very interesting to work in themes for music. We had themes for every part of the story, every layer of the story that we thought about. And the family one was probably, I think, the strongest one we followed. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much. You wanted to play us an example, I think.
Right. Well, actually, this cue is the last. This cue is the last cue of the film, and it's what we call the family theme. So it happens in very specific moments, and we can hear it right now, and then talk a little bit about it after. All right. there we go. So it's a recurrent theme that sounds like a lullaby or a music box almost to me. And maybe Kyle, if you like to, I can start talking about how it fits into the story, and
Please do, yeah.
And then you get on
yeah, I think it's actually an idea that we came up with. I didn't know originally it was going to become a recurring theme. I believe the first time we experimented with that was on the train ride about halfway through the film. And I'd written that to just kind of the scene of what everybody seemed to be experiencing emotionally and thinking about. And Rémi said that feels like family. And so we decided to expand upon that, create different instrumentations for it. And then it was actually his idea that, you know what, this could actually tie the whole film together at the end as well. And so I wrote a more expanded version of it, where it starts off with the quiet piano celeste, develops into the strings, which we've heard throughout. It's actually multiple layers of solo violin.
All right.
So it brings that emotional element, just having the live player layered on top. And yeah, I think it kind of utilizes the instrumentation we've heard throughout the film and has that feeling of togetherness. And I think it sort of captures the feeling of the film for me.
Yeah, we've used it at very specific moments in the film. It's a theme that comes up when food is not enough to drive the character's story arc, if I may say. It can feel heartwarming or bittersweet or even nostalgic, but it's the special sauce that makes the story relatable and sympathetic, to me, at least. For the main part, it's what celebrates this family bond that we mentioned. When you first, I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead, keep going.
When we first hear the piece, it's when David realizes in the Provence kitchen that bonding simply doesn't happen between the French team and the US team in the story, and then the theme plays. The theme not only represents the bond between David and his team, but it also represents the consciousness of that he has to use in order to make everything work. Every time the theme comes back, David and his kitchen family are in some way interacting with each other, from the use of food to bound to teams who are shy with each other, to when the camera flies away as they leave Provence, to the very quiet train ride, and then finally at the very end of the film when David, the food, and Koji set sail on different waters. It's that recurring theme that's like almost like a music box that we play at those moments.
And it kind of plays into what you were talking about before, how the soloist and the ensemble are playing a part and then together as well. Because celeste was one of those instruments that we used for certain situations as a solo.
Can you explain that instrument to me?
It's called the celeste. It's a small bell piano, kind of. You've heard it in like the Nutcracker, and a lot of people know it from Harry Potter now. It's kind of bright toy piano, a very specific one with a very specific character to it, and kind of manipulated it to have that more raw emotion feeling to it.
Because it is a lonely motif to begin with,
right.
And then it becomes surrounded by the supporting elements, which is, I suppose, exactly the story that we're telling of David.
Right.
Yeah.
That was, and Rémi, like I said, he had very, very specific emotions that we were trying to capture. And as he had been with the film for so long, he really had an idea for each of as it developed. And so as I learned more about it and the pacing and we figured out the language of the film, I sort of discovered all that as well. So it was a great collaboration because he let me experiment and try my own ideas, and then he knew when something sort of captured the right feeling, and we went that direction. And so it was a lot of fun.
It's a wonderful film and a wonderful score. Rémi, what's your next project? Are you going back into a kitchen? Are you addicted to kitchen stories now?
I think I got a lot more to discover in kitchens. I think it hides so many flavorful characters, if I may say, and I really want to use a platform to put these characters to life. So yeah, anything, and I mean, it's food, right? So like, what's not to like?
Did you eat well,
Yeah.
Remy?
During the shooting or during like the whole? We tried all the food that we shot, you know.
Right.
So I really can't complain. It was fabulous, and working in editing too just makes you really hungry.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the film, and best of luck with its distribution. And
you.
best of luck for your next projects. I really appreciated your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.